Wow, 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 wow. What's up everybody, I'm Maran and this is the 2023 Honda Civic Type R. So it's now on the all-new 11th generation version of the Civic, and it's obviously had a bunch of big changes and improvements here for the 2023 Type R. So you can see they nicely smoothed over the styling, which is a big change from the previous generation, which was much more aggressive. This is aggressive in a more graceful way. So you have the wider body panels, but it's really nicely blended, unlike some other competitors that are really bold and crazy with their styling. I really like that this is a little smoothed over for the fenders here, and I just think it all looks really great. It's all functional, by the way, this time as well. So you have a more open grille there, you have this vented hood, you see there's real brake ducts here to help cool off everything, and then out back you can see the new rear wing is even smoothed over there, and that is also of course very functional. Rear diffuser, all this helps contribute to having a low drag coefficient and the best downforce possible. And so with the changes for the 11th gen Civic, that gave it a more athletic stance in general. This vehicle is almost an inch longer, and it's about a half an inch wider and about a half an inch lower compared to a regular Civic hatchback for this generation. This is 3.5 inches wider, thanks to, again, these flared out fenders, the wider track and all that. And so it really makes this very, very impressive looking, especially in person. In pictures, you might not get a good sense of the dimensional changes here, and just, whenever you do actually stand up next to one here and check it out, that you'll see it really makes an understated but still very aggressive first impression. They also went further this time to differentiate it from the regular Civic hatch, with only the front doors, the roof, and the hatch itself being shared with the regular Civic hatch. Otherwise, everything else is a unique body panel. And previously with the last gen, they had some stuff stuck onto the rear doors, but they were the same rear doors as a regular hatch. Not so anymore. Those rear doors are unique, and they help to nicely flow into those wider fenders in the back there. And I also love that this is on the hatchback still, so you have the extra practicality to make this, just a really great all-around vehicle for people. And so, I don't know, from every angle, I just think they knocked it out of the park here with the styling on the new Civic Type R. The interior of the Type R is very red in typical Type R fashion, and I'll talk more about this interior later on in the video, but first, let's start up and go for a drive. So you have a unique Type R key here with the red Honda badging, and this one has a sticker on it, but still the same great small Honda key they introduced with the new Civic, and it's just a really great key. But it is keyless access, keyless entry, push button start, so you just leave the key in your pocket, put it in the clutch and the brake, and it starts right up. Hey, let's start with an acceleration, shall we? Here we go. Wow, wheel spin. Woo! Wow. All right. Woo, this thing is punchier than I was expecting, honestly. So we have this revised 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo engine that's 315 horsepower, 310 pound-feet of torque now, which is 9 more horsepower and 15 more pound-feet of torque than before. And man, oh man, this thing, it moves really well. And I mean, this is a little bit of a cooler day today, and we're on summer tires, but it's still 50 degrees, so it's not like these tires can't handle, these temperatures. It really is just impressive that it lit up the tires. And I'm also, by the way, just in the normal traction control modes, and it still gave me some wheel spin, which is great. I love that fun and that drama, and I'm glad that there's some wheel spin there. But of course, with the mechanical limited slip diff you have in these, it still was very even with the way it was putting the power down there. I also have the engine sound in the R mode, so I have it in the loudest setting. I'm in the individual mode, which is new here for the Type Rs for 2023. And so it allows you to customize all the different parameters there to make it exactly how you want it. And we're coming up to some back roads here, and I have the suspension, the adaptive suspension, in its sport mode. It goes up to R for a stiffer setting, or comfort if you want it a little bit looser. But wow. Okay, so really love, they did change the steering to improve the feel and all that. But one thing that I mean, Honda's always had great steering, especially the previous generation Type R, but this, you really can feel the mechanical LSD working. I mean, you can see there's a little bit of wet, damp patches here on this road since it rained yesterday, but it really is impressive how you can feel the limited slip diff really clawing away at the pavement here, especially considering this also has wider tires, which I think is one of the biggest handling improvements here on this vehicle for this year, is the fact that you have 265 wide Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires here on this. It's 20 millimeters wider than before, so I mean, a big tire upgrade going up 20 is a big deal. You usually don't see that on other cars, and so but yeah, a little bit of dampness there, and it was spinning in third gear at 3,500 RPMs here. So man, this thing, oh, but I love how it really sucks you into the corner there. You can kind of, you know, get on the gas early coming out of a corner, and the diff just does all the work for you and pulls you through way better than it should. And it is really impressive. Wow, wow, wow. You know, I really like the previous gen Type R, but this honestly is just impressing me more than I was expecting just off the bat here. So yeah, and also they managed to keep the weight fairly low. So I think it's about 67 pounds or so heavier than before, but we're still under 3,200 pounds. It's 3,188 for the curb weight here in these new Type Rs. And so that also really contributes to this very light feeling vehicle, and the fact that they also spread out the weight a little bit more. So the wheelbase is 1.4 inches longer than before on this new 11th generation of the Civic, and so that helps you for sure. The rev matching downshifts are great, and man, yeah, the way this thing just grips and goes though is impressive. Man, oh man. Yeah, and this road obviously is fantastic, so that certainly helps to really highlight, you know, this car's strengths. Is, you know, this kind of stuff is what this car was built for. But yeah, so I mean, really impressive, you know, as far as the wheelbase goes being longer. That's going to give you a more stable and planted ride. Also, the track is wider. It's 1 inch wider in the front and 0.75 inch wider in the rear. All right, a little bit of wheel spin coming out of the corner there. Man, this thing is ruthless coming out of these corners. It is impressive. Wow. And also the sport adaptive dampers setting here is really nice as well. It's a Goldilocks where, you know, you have a little bit of stiffness. It feels appropriate, but it's not, you know, rattling your fillings out of your teeth or anything. You know, with this, you know, with the R mode can be a little stiff, and I'll try that out in a few minutes here. But as of right now, I love the sport mode here. And, you know, Honda does some of the best adaptive damper tuning. I was so blown away, especially with the refresh of last generation's Civic Type R, where that was really amazing how it went from being a magic carpet ride in comfort mode to being like race car stiff in R mode. And I'll be curious to see, you know, how they've changed that here in this. I'll get to that in a second. But just from a grip standpoint, having the wider track, the wider tires, the more spread out wheelbase, I mean, all that is going to make this feel a good bit better handling wise. And again, it's not like the previous generation Type R was a bad handler by any means. It was amazing in every way, but this certainly, I think, moves the ball forward in a significant way, and feels so good. But man, I love this. This is so much fun. I'm having a blast here. Oh yeah, the grip is, holy crap, it's good. And the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tire also is a fantastic tire, just in general, and so I'm so glad they were able to go for those here on the Type R. If you do want even more grip, you can get Sport Cup 2 tires installed at your dealer. It's not a factory option, but as a dealer option, you can have them put on, and they actually did develop a specific Cup 2 tire for this car. So it's a specific one. It's not just an off-the-rack Cup 2. It's designed and engineered for this car. If you do want to have, you know, the absolute best grip possible. Brakes are also great. We just had a little spot there where I had to quickly slow down, and they're 13.3 or 13.8 inch rotors in the front, 12 inch rotors in the rear. You got 4-piston front calipers there, Brembos, that are really, really great as far as the grip goes. And okay, so now we got a bumpier bit of road here, and definitely bouncing us around a little bit, but it still is putting the power down so well though. It's hilarious how good this thing is tearing up this back road. Man, oh man. I am having a blast here, and it's really, really impressive. I gotta say, you know, obviously the only real competitor that has, you know, all-wheel drive and this much power is the GR Corolla. I have not driven that on normal roads, so I can't say from a street standpoint how that compares, but from driving the GR Corolla, I did drive it around like a little street course they had at the track, and taking the GR Corolla around the track. I gotta say that I think I like this a little bit better. This feels a little less peaky. This thing has like more punch all throughout the power band, versus the GR Corolla, you had to work the engine a little bit more, which is fun in its own way. But I think that this certainly feels, I mean, it's 15 more horsepower, not like that's a huge difference, but I certainly feel like this feels punchier than the GR Corolla does. And yes, you know, it'd be nice to have all-wheel drive here in this to put the power down perfectly. And you know, the rear-wheel drive kind of thing you can do a little bit of in the GR Corolla is fun, but I also really love the front-wheel drive drama and the wheel spin, and you know, just the traditional hot hatch kind of setup here with the front-wheel drive Type R. So it's going to come down to personal preference and what you need, but I gotta say that so far, This is making a very, very solid first impression, and man, this thing is phenomenal to drive. I also do like the sound is a little bit better. They did say this new exhaust design allows them to have a little bit more of a straight through design to it. So they say whenever you're up in the higher RPMs, it does open up. There's an active valve now on that the middle exhaust tip there, and so that active exhaust does give you about 13% more airflow, and so that's nice. Now, I still wish it was a little bit louder, but oh man, I even got a little bit of oversteer there just because I was really pitching it in. But this thing is playful. I love how playful this is. And this road also is certainly helping because it's a little slick and insane with these corners here. Woo! Yeah, first gear. All right, so I was getting a little bit of a torque steer a tiny bit there, but that was a very challenging circumstance, and it still fought it really well. And but man, this thing is so much fun. I'm so impressed with the way they set everything up so that it does handle so well, and it gives you so much confidence, but it still gives you a little bit of a playful character and something you do have to kind of manage a little bit, at least again on these cooler, you know, slightly damp roads. This thing can still be a little bit of a handful, which I like. I don't want something that's drama free and that's just some precise instrument. I want something that also plays with you, that you have to use your brain to drive a little bit and not just have something that's totally sanitized. And I love the balance that they engineered into this with that, and that blend of fun and precision at the same time. Steering is also great, you know, with all the changes. They made a variety of little small changes to it to improve it, and so I mean, it just feels so good in typical Honda fashion. And you know, all the other driver inputs were also really good. So calming down here for a second, just kind of doing some more cruising. You know, other things I love about these new Type Rs is you have much better visibility than the previous generation. Since they pulled the A-pillar back on these new Civics, you know, door mirrors are on the doors now instead of right at the A-pillar there. And you know, all the inputs as far as like the brake pedal has a little bit of travel to it, so it's not like you have to be super delicate with your inputs, but it is still very responsive, very strong feeling brakes, you know, at the pedal there. Throttle response is also pretty immediate and really nice. Clutch pedal also is not bad. I think it's actually maybe a tiny bit heavier than SI, but it's honestly not far off in my mind. It feels really nice. I think it would, you know, be very easy to use in daily driving traffic, and it's been about 2 years or so since I did drive the previous generation Type R, but from my memory, this clutch feels a little lighter than the previous generation, which is certainly welcome because I don't think you give up any feel really. It still feels great. The auto rev matching is great. It's also 10% faster now this year, and so that's also because they improved the flywheel. It's a little bit lighter, and they, you know, changed some of the other dynamics here. And typical Honda shifter, amazing, super well defined. It just feels great. I'd say it actually feels a tiny bit lighter than the previous generation shifter, again from my memory from 2 years ago, so not precise by any means, but I do have to say that it just feels a little more accessible. Certainly feels a little heavier and heftier than the Civic Si, but that shifter also felt amazing, but this feels even better and a little more mechanical feeling than even the SI is already great standard. One other last little thing I'll comment on here before I hit the track is that I'm also very impressed there's no rev hang. You know, I think that they did a really good job of improving the rev hang situation with the SI, but this I think actually has none that I can detect here. Again, I'll drive more throughout the day, but you know, even at low speeds and setting off and stuff, I didn't really notice any rev hang with shifting or anything. So I know that's a common problem with other turbocharged four cylinders with manuals these days, but this has no rev hang that I can tell so far and feels really nice. And out on the track, the Type R was impressive while also being fun and friendly at the same time. I think my favorite part has got to be the limited slip differential. The way Honda does it is so satisfying because you really feel it working, and it allows you to get on the gas earlier than you normally would because it just pulls you right through the rest of the corner and really slingshots you out of the corners as well. And at least in the R and the Sport damper settings, the back end actually wanted to rotate a little in the right conditions if you provoked it. And while Northern California in November isn't very warm, the car is perform flawlessly. They increased airflow by 48% with the new styling up front there, and combined with the brake cooling duct and the larger radiator and other improvements, it means that this car should have no heat issues, hopefully. And it's been several years since I drove the last generation Type R on track, so I can't do a great comparison, but from my memory, what I can say is that this one felt a little more planted and confidence inspiring, and it was just an absolute blast to take around Sonoma Raceway. But yes, the interior is very red, and that's the only way it comes here for the Type R, but this interior in the 11th generation Civics is so nice, and so building upon that here for the Type R is great. You know, this very clean and very classic looking dashboard, very simple controls for everything, great technology. These seats also are redesigned so they're more comfortable in addition to hugging you in better, and they certainly still have some beefy side bolsters to step over whenever you're hopping in this thing, but aside from that, I mean, they're really great seats, and I do love that they're perforated here so they breathe a little bit better than the last generation, which could get a little hot there. But yeah, the extra comfort is great. I've been driving around in this vehicle all day, had plenty of comfort, and so really awesome seats as long as you don't mind the crazy thigh bolsters there. And the front seats are 0.8 inches lower than before too, so a tiny bit dropped to give you an even sportier driving position than the last generation. The steering wheel seems to be about the same as any other Civic, aside from having the red stitching on it here, but I mean, all these Civics have great steering wheels and just feel so nice. But the gauges, you get the full 10.2 inch digital gauge cluster here in these, and you get that cool little F1 inspired shift light there at the top, which really comes in handy again for track driving and things like that. But this gauge cluster is awesome, and it is unique here for the Type R. You'll see the speedometer goes to 200, and in addition you have the sport look, the regular look, but then there's also the R mode, which is of course not found on any other Civic or Honda in general. And so it's a really cool bar style tack there. Kind of reminds me of the S2000 a little bit, and you can customize some of the information in there as well, which is great, but it does give you just so much just even in its default setting, and just looks really cool. And also in the infotainment system, you'll find a unique log R mode, and so that will give you additional temperatures and G meters and a bunch of other stuff that you can check out in there, in addition to all the stuff you see again in the gauge cluster, which is nice how it shows you boost gauge and all that kind of stuff is great. And also, by the way, all Type R's there's only one trim for them, so there's no options or packages. They all get this 9-inch touchscreen, which has wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto. It's hooked up to a Bose stereo. This is the first time we have a premium stereo here in the Type R's as well. It sounds fantastic, just like all the new Civics with this new Bose stereo. It's a really top-notch stereo for this segment. And so, just pair up with this infotainment screen, which is really easy to use. Just a really well done setup there with all the customizable tiles and things. I just really love these new Civics. You can go watch my interior review on the Civics in general if you want to hear all the details about this interior, but it's really great. A few other little unique things here for the Type R is that you have this aluminum trim here around the shifter. You have the R mode next to your drive mode selector there, and you have the aluminum shift knob, which is cool. It's a historical thing they've done, for decades here, but it isn't great in the summertime. It will burn your hand, and so just keep that in mind. And you can, of course, Honda offers, like a leather wrap shift knob if you want, but it's one thing to note there. And otherwise, though, all the same great other things you get in other Civics, with great storage space, really great comfort, and just a very nice interior. The back seat also in these 11th generation Civics is more spacious. So you have about 1.4 inches more rear legroom than the last Civic Type R, so that's a nice extra perk. But another quirk of the Type R is, they always get rid of the middle seat in the back there. So instead you have two cup holders there and no fold down armrest like you get in a regular Civic hatch. And so that means this is only a 4-seater vehicle. And so one little thing to note there if you do plan on packing people into the back seat. And the cargo space is also improved here in these 11th generation Civic hatchbacks. So it's a nice wide and deep space, and just, really nice to have that extra practicality of the hatch. All right, so now I've been driving the Civic Type R all day here, and I have a few more impressions about it. First, I want to get back to the adaptive dampers briefly and just say that they're really nice in the different modes. I think that the differences might be a tiny bit less drastic than they actually were with the refresh Type R for the past generation. I think that it still has a really nice bandwidth, but it still is, a little bit sportier even in the comfort mode. I feel like it was maybe a tiny bit more comfortable in the last generation, but I think as far as the R mode, it's pretty comparable to last generation's R mode from my memory again. But, I just think that it's still really nice you have that, duality of the different settings, and I do feel like it's a nice step up, and I think comfort mode is actually even like a little bit softer than like a Civic Si, for example. I just really like the way you have, those different options to pick from in the individual mode to dial it in. So if you want everything else racy and you still want the soft suspension, you can have that as well, and it's really nice to have all that. Another thing that I'm also very impressed by is this exhaust. You know, whenever I saw on paper it's, you know, 13% better airflow whenever it's wide open, you know, and I know that some of this stuff is piped in with the speakers, and you can change that again with that individual mode to have more or less sound. But I really like the sound, you know, both from the speakers and the exhaust, and whenever, especially I was flat out on track and stuff, it actually sounds really good. And I do think the volume is enough, and I think that it's great. Obviously the aftermarket will fix that if you want even more, but I think that it's a nice happy medium. Now, you know, I think it's a little more louder and a little more enjoyable to listen to than like the GR Corolla, which I think could use a little more sound. I think this, you know, sounds a little bit nicer than that, but I also still think that this does not sound as exciting as the Elantra N or the Veloster, and you know, those had all the crackles and the pops and stuff, and I wish they would have went a little crazier with this exhaust personally, at least as far as, you know, maybe giving it a little more character in, you know, that kind of a way. But you know, I know crackles and pops aren't for everyone, but just, you know, one thing that, you know, comparing this to those competitors, you know, I feel like the, you know, the Elantra N exhaust just made me crack up and laugh, and it was just a ton of fun. And I love that that had different modes for the exhaust, so you could turn that down if you didn't like it, but I like that extra character. And so, you know, that's just one thing I do wish this had. Now, that is one other thing to mention, comparing this to the Elantra N, and I'll compare it to some of the others in a minute, but I also feel like, you know, yes, this is front wheel drive, and yes, it still will spin the front wheels, but it definitely doesn't have as much wheel hop as the Elantra N. So I really like that, you know, they're a little bit better at putting the power down here, I think, in the Type R. But you know, there are some other things to mention as far as how this compares to its competitors, which I'll briefly mention. You know, I can go on a whole another 30-minute video about how this compares and stuff, but what I will say is that in my mind, it feels, you know, a little punchier than the GR Corolla. Again, they're not identical circumstances. This is in cooler weather, so the turbo's happier and stuff, but this just feels punchier than not only the GR Corolla, but actually it feels punchier than the Golf R, which has the same 315 horsepower. But this just, I don't know if it's, you know, the gearing being a little bit shorter maybe in this compared to the Golf R, that just felt like a little less exciting with that manual. And with this, I mean, it's just, every gear is so punchy. It just feels, this motor feels so eager and just like it just wants to take off on you. And it just, I love the way this feels. And so to me, again, I would have to drive them all back to back, but you know, I drove all three this year, and I have to say that I think this definitely feels the fastest out of the three, just from the seat of the pants kind of feeling. As far as refinement goes, you know, these Civics are a little bit more refined, a little more luxurious, and a little more spacious as well compared to the GR Corolla. So I think that, you know, this feels a little more polished than that does, and you know, a little more worth the money as far as the interior goes compared to, you know, the GR Corolla, which with the Circuit Edition is basically the same price, and you have plastic window switches versus the nice, you know, metal trimming you have here on those, and on the, you know, little climate control knobs and things like that. You know, there's just some nice premium touches here that make this feel like, yes, you're paying 44 grand for the performance, but you're also getting a pretty nice interior for that money as well. Yes, it's not 44 grand nice, but it is nice nonetheless, and nicer than the Corolla. And I honestly think this interior actually feels nicer than the Golf R as well, with this having more metal than that does. Now, the Golf R still has the most features per dollar, as far as, you know, that has heated and cooled seats. This has neither, you know, and so there's some nice improvements there at the Golf R. It even has heated rear seats and, you know, some other nice touches, heated steering wheels. None of those things you get here in this. Even the GR Corolla offers heated seats, so you don't have that here in this. So, you know, that's just one thing to keep in mind. But I mean, with the cloth seats, not a big deal. They don't get as hot as the leather in the Golf R, or as cold really. So, you know, I feel like it's fine to not have those things. It just comes down to, again, your personal preference though. And while the Elantra N is less powerful, that is about $10,000 cheaper than this. And that's really I think honestly the best competitor from a value standpoint, as far as, you know, that gives you, yes, less power, but it's a lot of fun still. And yes, it's not as polished as this is. It's not as fast as this is. I mean, I drove them both at Sonoma Raceway. This definitely, you know, is setting faster laps than I did in the Elantra N. So I mean, it's definitely, this is more capable. It's more car in a lot of ways. You know, there's a lot that it has going for it, but if you're someone who just wants the most fun per dollar, I think that, you know, Is this 10 grand more fun than the Elantra N? Probably not. It's probably a 10 grand better car in all the ways, that it is, improved over the Elantra N. But if you are someone who wants, the most fun per dollar, I think that the Elantra N is still a blast, even with, its less refined driving dynamics and its, slightly less amount of power. But pricing and fuel economy are the last two things I mentioned here very briefly. So as far as fuel economy goes, they get 22 mpg in the city, 28 on the highway, and 24 combined. And pricing, they all basically cost the same. They're $44,000 unless you get 3 of the premium paint colors. So the white, the blue, and the gray are like $395 extra. So that'll put it just barely over $44,000. But essentially you're at 44 grand here. And $44,000 is basically exactly the same pricing as the Golf R and also the GR Corolla Circuit Edition. Now there's the Core Edition of the GR Corolla. It gets a little cheaper. But I think, as far as the pricing goes, when you consider inflation and you consider the extra performance here, it's an appropriate price increase. And again, it's right there in line with all the others out there. And so I think that it's, a good price for this vehicle if you can get one at, MSRP. Now, Honda did say they're not artificially capping production. They're just limited by, however many they can produce. I think historically they've put out about 4,000 Type Rs a year. So, it might be more, might be less. This go around, we'll have to wait and see. They couldn't, give me any kind of, firm estimates on how many they're going to be able to do. But just know that, at least there's no artificial cap here. They're trying to build as many as they have demand for, and that's great to hear. And so hopefully, even though there's, always markups on any kind of new performance vehicle, just keep in mind that, hopefully eventually you will be able to get one of these, for a good price, and, you won't have to fight dealer markups forever, hopefully. But yeah, overall, this thing is a rocket. It is so much fun to drive. I absolutely love the new Civic Type R. And so yeah, I highly recommend it if you want something, especially front-wheel drive, and you want something this much power, this much performance. It is tough to beat. It's hard to say, with all these awesome hot hatches. Obviously, they have their own niche of buyer, and, it'll come down to exactly what you're looking for. But man, I definitely think this is one of my favorites out there currently, and it is just so much fun. One of the most fun cars you can get under 50 grand right now. It is just awesome. And so anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the 2023 Civic Type R. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Honda for providing this opportunity. Make sure to also like, comment, and subscribe to keep these videos coming. And yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.